All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind. But we're going to have a show.
And hello across the globe, wherever you are, welcome. This is our offering for this Wednesday, and it is a great one. Really excited about the people who will be passing through and some of the stuff we'll be talking about.
What?
Yeah, I know. I can't believe it myself. There's a bunch of stuff I can't believe. In fact, I'll share some emails and some stuff about yesterday's show. Can't believe all of that. I mean, I don't know what happened yesterday, but a lot of people tuned in. I wish I knew what happened. Because I do the same thing today. Yeah. Kim is here, of course. We love our Kim. And
hey, we have a new House Speaker.
We do indeed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's never been anything like this.
There certainly hasn't. I'll give you some information about him, and you may know some stuff about Mike Johnson, too. But he comes from, he's a, deep South guy in pretty much every way. In all the stereotypical ways, might be a way to put it. Albert is here, everyone.
Albert, thank you.
He is the commissioner, and he runs this show today. So very cool that he's here. I'll read a couple of emails. Cenk from the Young Turks, TYT, will be here, along with the master of scary movies, the king of horror. Jeff Dixon is coming in the last half hour to kind of cleanse our palate after a lot of talk about the Middle East and about politics. We'll change gears a bit. John Rothmann, the professor, at the bottom of this hour. And we'll talk about the unfolding situation in the Middle East. Rockets fired at Tel Aviv just in the last few hours. It's kind of lost in everything that there is an ongoing battle. It's not like Hamas was one and done.
Right.
They are still firing at Israel. And Israel, of course, has essentially constricted all of life in Gaza, forced these evacuations now such that it would appear that there is about to be a major military exercise. But now, with some urging from the U.S. and the West, you're finding Israel may wait, they may refigure. This is a serious problem for Israel having the moral high ground after the Hamas attack, but losing the moral high ground as revelations about what's happening in Gaza become more prominent. I think this question as to what should be done, who is responsible, it's getting foggy, and it is, in a way, reminiscent of all of the Middle East questions through the years. In a sense, as desperate and horrifying as this whole situation is, with hostages still being held in Gaza, the two hostages released, the one older lady tells the story of the sophisticated tunnels and the way she was taken through this, hellish area underneath Gaza. Even as that all unfolds, it all has a familiar ring. The desperation, the lack of feasible options, the lack of real negotiating partners. This is all stuff that is consistent with this problem in the Middle East through the decades. But we'll talk about it with Rothmann, and we'll talk about it with Cenk from TYT. Also, Cenk is running for president. We'll touch on that as well. This House Speaker, can I get to... I wanted to get to these emails before I get to the House Speaker. Albert, you're needed. What should I do?
Albert, thank you.
No.
Yeah, we should just do the emails first, and then we'll get into the thick of some of the news here in our new speaker.
Okay. That's why Albert's getting the big money. All right.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Thank you for your emails. We are the Mark Thompson Show at gmail.com. I'll get to Mike Johnson, the speaker, the new speaker for the GOP. But several of you wrote remarking on the numbers on yesterday's show. You know, this is a crowd-funded show, and it's a community of viewers and supporters. There you see the Mark Thompson Show at gmail.com if you want to send us a note. But I mention it because, you know, our victory and our progress is your progress. You've supported the show, and so as we progress, you should take some pride because we run your names at the end of the show, those who are Patreon and PayPal contributors, and we run your names during the show, of course, if you're hitting us with a super sticker or super chat. So it's in that spirit that I think Tom writes. This might be a record, and I'm not sure what happened, but I love how nobody knows what happened.
What the hell?
It's like our little country general store had all of these city folks show up. I don't know what happened. It seems you or I actually hit 1,000 likes today for the show. He's only responding to the likes. The numbers are pretty, I'll get to those in a second.
Yeah.
It seems you or I actually hit 1,000 likes today for the show, and it was only 3 hours after you aired live. What happened? Did everyone hear that the 38-year-old teary-eyed Christian lawyer Jenna blah, blah, blah was going to be on?
Yeah.
Even your one-year anniversary show only got about 899 likes so far. Anyway, he says, it was pretty funny the way it went down. When I started listening, it was around 970 likes. I was kind of surprised, but thought, well, great. Then it kept creeping up toward 1,000 within 20 minutes, which is also unusual. Then, as it got within a few likes shy of 1,000, it went backwards a few numbers. What the F, I thought. Either people are not happy with what you're doing, or there are others out there waiting to be the 1,000th like. So I said to myself, screw this. I'm going to try and smash it with my pale finger and make it 1,000. He wanted to be the 1,000th, Kim. He wanted to be the 1,000th like yesterday.
Smashed it with your iron rod.
It's all about the little things, you know?
Sometimes I've been there. Like, I've been the first like on a lot of videos from different people through the years, and it's kind of like I was the first like when I see the person, I go, hey, by the way, I saw your video. I was the first like. So I said to myself, screw this. I'm going to try to smash it with my pale finger, make it 1,000
Smashed
likes.
it with your iron
Okay,
rod.
I had to subtract my like. The original like had to be subtracted, he says. And then wait until it hit 999 and slammed on the brakes a couple of seconds early for the yellow light and snapped a picture of it, 999. Okay, end of story, and my small thrill for the day. He did make it 1,000 likes. Tom was the 1,000th like.
Smashed it with your iron rod.
Now, do you have it, Albert? He sent us pictures of it happening. I'm going to bet you don't have it. Am I right about that?
I do have it. It's the one in his car, right?
You do have it? Wow, that is extraordinary, Albert. All right. All right.
Albert, thank you.
This is Tom.
Oh, there he is. Yeah.
There it is on yesterday's show, slowing down at the yellow light so that he could be the 1,000th like on the show. There it is. Wow. Very impressive.
Yeah.
Very impressive indeed.
And thank you for caring that much. Really.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. I'll have you know, I was the first like on today's show.
You were the first like?
I was the very first like.
Well, you were on the air. How is that possible? Oh.
No, because I can click like right after I create the show. What? See, so I create the show and then I like it.
Wow.
That's not
I
very.
say,
That's real.
well done, Kim.
That
Good
sounds
job
really,
creating that show. I'm going to thumbs up you.
Yeah. Thumbs up.
What the hell is going on in the United States of America?
It was revealed overnight or yesterday, I guess, during the show. I don't know, somebody sent me an email about the fact that dude was on mushrooms, the guy who, tried to crash the plane.
Right.
And, I mean, I'll tell you what wasn't revealed. The fact that he was still scheduled to fly himself in the cockpit. He was
That's
scheduled.
Where he was headed.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, within the, during the time that the mushrooms were still maybe not wearing off, he was supposed to actually pilot one of these planes. Or I don't know that he was a pilot, to be fair. He might have been a co-pilot, but he was on the flight crew.
Yeah.
So
What?
yeah, I know. That was my view.
I think
Anyway.
for an international flight, too.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Crazy. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for the support of the show. And yesterday, I can't find the other email. Did I send it to you, Albert? The one about, or maybe I sent it to Kim. And when stuff happens,
got one.
You got one? Go ahead, real quick. And
This is from Farshid, who writes.
Oh, that's the one I wanted. Yeah, Farshid.
Okay,
Thank you.
he says, "Holy smokes! Between your full steam video and David K. Johnston's interview yesterday, you guys pulled in over 85,000 views. I'm so happy for you guys. This really made my day. Nice bump in subscribers overnight as well. That 20K number getting closer, much faster than we thought. A huge congrats to you and your team. Wishing you all the success and growth in year 2, and always there daily with you guys for the ride. Thank you for all that you guys do to bring joy to everyone daily." That is from Farshid.
Farshid, great supporter, sends me stories, as do many of you, and I
Awesome.
love his support. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and
Anyway.
that David K. Johnston breakout video from yesterday has 74,000 views as well.
Yeah, and those of you who are just knocking through for the first time, that's a big number for us. So we're we're proud of the show. We work really hard on it. It's a project for me so far, like a life project more than a monetary winner. But I do think that as we get momentum, we will see all good things come into the show. And we try to be rigorous in our evaluations of things. And Maud is one of our regular supporters. Don't give up. We're almost there. Yeah, we are. Big shout out for Maud Day.
Big shout out.
Mm-hmm. Maud Day sounds like the character in the Marvel Universe. Don't you think, Albert?
Yeah, I wonder what her superpower would be. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Or it's very Daily Planet reporter with superpowers or something. Like
the alias name.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Anyway, Maud, love you. Craig Allen says, I don't always get to tune in, but been a fan since the KGO days.
Nice.
I sport my Mark Thompson Show beanie every day. Loved you in Air Force One. Yeah, where they gave away my line. I gave away my line. Craig Allen, big shout out.
Big shout out.
Thank you, Craig, for the 10 spot. Mike Johnson is the GOP pick for Speaker, and here's a little something about him.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yeah. I'll be telling you more in the days ahead as we see what his real agenda is. But, unknown to many Americans, Maryland says he comes from Louisiana, I believe. So, yeah, he was first elected to the House in 2016. He came in on the Trump wave, okay? Mm-hmm. And he serves as vice chairman of the House Republican Conference. He's the GOP deputy whip. So he's kind of worked as an assistant to leadership. And he is an attorney focused on constitutional law and how to get around it. He joined a group of House Republicans in voting to sustain the objection to electoral votes. So he has a distinguished history denying election results. This is during Trump's first impeachment trial in January 2020. He also, along with a group of other GOP lawmakers, served a largely ceremonial role in the Senate impeachment team, they say. Johnson also sent an email from a personal email account in 2020 to every House Republican soliciting signatures for an amicus brief in the long-shot Texas lawsuit seeking to invalidate electoral college votes from multiple states. Again, he leaned in hard on election denying and on trying to overturn it. Tom says, Mark, it sounds like you're saying my Johnson is the next nomination for Speaker. Enunciate, please. Wow.
You know what? I prefer the Mark Thompson Johnson to this guy.
My Johnson would be a...
I'm going to take it. Sold.
An upgrade.
Yes.
I am just saying...
What?
Yeah. After the election was called in favor of Joe Biden on November 7th, 2020, Johnson posted on X, then it was Twitter, I have just called President Trump to say this. Stay strong and keep fighting. The nation is depending upon your resolve. We must exhaust every available legal remedy to restore Americans' trust in fairness of our election system. You know what's so crazy about this? I mean, again, this is your new Speaker of the House. But what's crazy about this is through these various plea deals, Sidney Powell, Jenna Ellis, now Mark Meadows we'll get to, it seems clear, isn't it? Clear to everybody. They knew it was BS, right? Yeah. We know. Just like when Trump says, my inaugural crowd was the biggest crowd in history. Whatever, he's serving it up like a short order chef. All the big lies, the small lies. You realize, is just part of the parade of fraud. They know it's fraud. So this is, again, it's all laid bare increasingly in many of these plea deals. Although Trump said he won't endorse anyone in the speaker's race, he did lean support to Johnson in a post on Truth Social. Maybe that put him over the top. This is what he said. In 2024, this is Trump saying this, we will have an even bigger and more important win. My strong suggestion, in capital letters, is to go with the leading candidate, Mike Johnson, and get it done fast, in capital letters. He is on the Judiciary Committee, Johnson is, and he's on the Armed Services Committee. And he's also a former chair of the Republican Study Committee. And look, he's a deep South dude, I think. Again, rode to power with the Trump wave in 2016. And he's now your new Speaker of the House. So we'll see. I was hoping for someone who, doesn't embrace this election denial thing, but clearly that was a bridge too far for this party. So that's the word on Mike Johnson.
Lady Beatrice says Johnson's going to screw things up before Christmas. Mark my words.
Well, he'll really have a big job right away, and that's important to all Americans. And it's not investigating Hunter Biden, which is a priority of the party. And it's not trying to impeach Joe Biden, which is another priority. Mm-hmm. It's trying to keep the government going. This government is not funded past November 17th. And so now you've got a speaker, GOP. You control the House. You have to appropriate funds. You have to green light keeping this government open. So let's see how we do.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I wanted to do one other thing before I get Professor Rothmann on. As I mentioned, Cenk Uygur joins in the second hour to talk about what's going on in the Middle East, but also his run for the presidency. It seems like there's some legal impediments to his run for the presidency. And by the way, there are legal impediments that I have never backed. That's that whole thing. You got to be born in this country to be that's the most, it's the weirdest nativist thing. I don't get it. SF Blue Note, thank you for the super sticker. And a big shout out to you. Thank you for the 10 spot. Love it.
Big shout out.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, everybody. Every little bit counts. I have a law and disorder before Newsom vetoed what? I'm trying to keep this
never mind.
Okay. I used to be a special ed teacher. No. Okay. All right. Albert, are you standing by with law and disorder?
I'm ready.
Law and disorder, and then we'll get into, with Professor Rothmann, I'll get into the Mark Meadows thing a little bit with him. I think it's a pretty big story. Mark Meadows, by the way, if he's chatting with prosecutors, he's essentially going against his book. He had a book where he said, the election was rigged and blah, 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 blah. It was all that crap, right? And now he's basically talking to prosecutors. It's going to go away against everything that he wrote in that book. Again, we knew it was BS when the book was put out, but he was selling books and he was towing the line. Anyway, we'll talk to Rothmann about that and, of course, the Middle East. Meantime, here's some law and disorder.
In the criminal justice system, the people,
pimps, addicts, thieves, bums, winos, girls who can't keep an address, and men who don't care,
are represented by two separate yet equally important groups.
A cop, a flatfoot, a bull, a dick, John Law. You're the fuzz, the heat, you're poison, you're trouble, you're bad news.
These are their stories.
This was, I believe, sent to me by Farshid, who was mentioned earlier. Major Republican donor who called Barack Obama the N-word dies after attempting to kill his wife in murder-suicide gone awry.
Oh, man.
I mean, that may be one of the best headlines that I've come across in a while. A former GOP donor who once made headlines after calling former President Barack Obama the N-word fatally shot himself after attempting to kill his wife. Police are saying that the altercation between them occurred outside a BurgerFi restaurant. It was about 8 o'clock at night. They were in the parking lot. Steve Alembic shot his wife. She's a psychologist, Dawn Poland. And then ran into the eatery before turning the gun on himself. She survived the shooting, though in critical condition. He is 72 years old. He did not survive. She was treated at the scene, transported to Delray Medical Center. This did happen in Florida. A grim scene for sure. Authorities are saying they're not sure about Alembic's motives, but he had recently been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Maybe it was related to some kind of mental disconnect.
Yeah.
Alembic is a Boca Raton resident, donor to former President Donald Trump, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, and then Governor Rick Scott. So he's a good Republican. He's the kind that you falls in line and backs the Lord and Savior Trump and everybody else.
Anyone who's using the N-word, it seems like they have an inordinate amount of anger, right, in them.
Agreed.
And so I guess it's not a surprise that it would also be a domestic violence kind of situation. So
well put. The donor became a conservative media darling, dressing up often in Old Glory. Like he wore the flag in various, they was tailored to various outfits, but he was always wearing kind of the red, white, and blue. He tweeted racist comments about Obama in 2018, calling him a Muslim N-word. Yeah, this guy's just the bottom.
Angry. He's angry.
Yeah.
He's an angry, crazy person.
And when called out on it, he says, so somebody like Chris Rock can get up on stage and use the word and there's no problem? But some white guy says it and he's a racist? Really? I grew up in New York in the 50s. We were he uses a slur there.
You do not know what you are talking about.
Exactly. All I can say is rest in peace. That's Law and Disorder for today.
Tune in again next time for more Law and Disorder on The Mark Thompson Show.
All right, that's it. Let's roll. Hey, let's be careful out there.
Super Bowl, smash the like button like a boss. Hit us with a thumbs up. And thank you to Harry, our regular listener viewer. Thank you for a 5-spot, Harry.
Big shout out.
Big shout out. Congrats on the huge number of likes. You're now more popular than KGO. Wow. What? Is pretty crazy. If you're new here, please subscribe, like, and share, as they say. It makes a big difference, and then I'm going to get to Kim's News and Rothmann. Makes a big difference when you take a video and you post it to your Facebook. You take a video, you post it to whatever social platform you're on. It makes a big difference. It might be a short, It might be David K. Johnston, whatever. And when you say, hey, subscribe to the show, I really like it, I think you will too, or whatever, that just helps grow our footprint. So appreciate all of that in addition to all the ways you financially help us. All right, so Rothmann after Kim's News. That's the plan, Albert?
Love it. Yep.
All right. Love it, love it, love it. Can't get enough of it. And then the master of horror in the second hour, the king of Halloween is here. Ooh. Yes. Just give me a short one, please. I don't need a
Do you
whole...
feel it?
Yeah.
It's the Mark
Thank
Thompson
you. I don't
Show.
need a big production.
everyone. The Mark Thompson Show. I'm Kim McAllister. This report is sponsored by Tenuta Vineyards in Livermore. And let us begin with Republican Mike Johnson of Louisiana, selected or elected Speaker of the House. On the first ballot today, the Louisiana Republican got enough votes after failed attempts from 3 other fellow Republicans to win the gavel. He is replacing California Republican Kevin McCarthy, who was recently voted out of that position. Both the U.S. and Russia are among the countries calling for a pause in the fighting in the Israel-Hamas war to allow humanitarian aid to reach Palestinian civilians in Gaza. The Israel Defense Force says it continues to respond to rocket attacks. The IDF said its jets hit Syrian army infrastructure and mortar launchers as well. A former White House chief of staff is a step closer to becoming the U.S. ambassador to Israel. By a 12-9 vote, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee advanced Jack Lew's nomination for an expected confirmation by the full Senate. In addition to chief of staff, Lew served as Treasury Secretary in the Obama administration. Any restaurant can promote Taco Tuesday after Jersey Shore restaurant finally said no more to the trademark that it owned for 4 decades, citing mounting legal costs. Gregory's Restaurant and Bar in Summers Point, New Jersey, is giving up its fight to keep that trademark, Taco Tuesday. Taco Bell had filed a lawsuit against the restaurants across the country to free up the Taco Tuesday phrase, and Gregory's was the last holdout. So now anybody can say Taco Tuesday, and it's all right. Yeah. More Americans are saying violence might be the solution to get U.S. politics back on track. A survey by the Public Religion Research Institute says 1/3 of Republicans and 13% of Democrats believe patriots may have to resort to violence. This marks the 8th survey since March of 2021. The results are an increase of at least 6% since the first survey. Well, looks like the B-52s won't be taking part in a scheduled entertainment for the state dinner for the Australian Prime Minister at the White House tonight. The band members will still attend the dinner as guests, but First Lady Jill Biden said dance and party music at the White House didn't seem appropriate at a time of so much pain and sorrow given what is happening in the Middle East. So, no B-52s tonight.
B-52 is also kind of an awkward name for even at this time of intense military tension.
B-52 bomber, yeah.
Yeah, it's just but I understand that's just a band name, but still,
A group of engineers in the UK has discovered dinosaur footprints. A press release from the government's Environment Agency says the group was looking into how to reinforce sea defenses when they found the fossils. The agency's regional flood and coastal risk manager said the footprints give just a hint of what life was like. He said the discovery's meaning during a time where scientists are working to fight climate change compared to a period of time we can only imagine. So, here's another one of these stories. I should almost forward it to Albert for Friday Fabulous Florida, but I'm going for it. This one out of Hollywood, Florida. Nothing like getting up in the morning and finding an iguana in your toilet. That is what a Florida man says about an experience he had on Saturday. Hollywood's Gary Greenspan went to the bathroom, opened the lid on the commode, and found a giant lizard inside. That's great. At least you didn't sit down first, right? He says
there's never been anything like this.
Jumped back about 4 feet and called animal control. Before they could arrive, though, he said the iguana disappeared down the drain, slithering away. Then Greenspan got a call from a neighbor saying there was an iguana in his toilet. It's like a whack-a-mole popping up in toilets around the neighborhood. Unlike Greenspan, though, the neighbor caught the iguana himself. Greenspan admits he's not a manly man when it comes to large lizards, but he did help his neighbor dispose of the iguana. Greenspan tells 7 News he was very happy, obviously, to take it up the road and let it loose. Just stay out of the toilet, stay out of the bathroom. This report is sponsored by Tenuta Vineyards. This is so great. I got a message yesterday from a listener that went to a grape stomp at Tenuta Vineyards, had the best time. Really, really enjoyed what was offered there with a catered lunch and all the fun that they had. This is from Karen, and she says, my friend Barb and I had a wonderful time at Tenuta Winery in Livermore this afternoon. That please excuse my shiner on the left eye. She's got a big shiner. She said, I was going for my flu shot at Kaiser last week, had a rough encounter with a parking barrier, and the parking barrier won. I tripped over it, upset that I wasn't looking down to the ground where I was going because someone was beckoning me from the flu shot tent. But even with the shiner, she said, what a time we had at Tenuta Winery. I recommend it to anyone for a nice, friendly, fun afternoon. Bought some Why Are You Yelling Red. It is great, and it's really worth the trip out to Livermore. So that's from Karen Q.
Oh, that's cool. She did send a pic. I guess we don't have it ready, but she does have that, smiling face with the shiner. It's kind of cute.
She does. Yeah, I'll try to pull it up while I tell you that this is an exclusive deal for the Mark Thompson Show. You can get 10% off of everything, and that includes the catered luncheon and the grape stomp. All you have to do is call Rich out at Tenuta Vineyards, and you can get your 10% off. You have to say smash it with the iron rod, though.
Smash it with your iron rod.
The number is 925. To wait for it to come back around again.
925-699-4576.
4576.
Yeah.
You'd think I would have it by then. Here's the picture of Karen Q. You can see she's got a shiner there, but she's got
the KGO and Exile t-shirt. That was a limited edition shirt. They don't make them anymore.
And that is Karen and her friend Barb, and that is Rich at Tenuta Vineyards, and smiles all around, having a great time. So our thanks to Tenuta Vineyards for sponsoring the show. Please take advantage of your 10% off with the Why Are You Yelling Red or any of the wines, any of the events they have at Tenuta.
And they ship the wine to you. You do not have to be in the Bay Area, just to remind you of that. Yeah.
I'm Kim McAllister. This is The Mark Thompson Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Shadow Stevens. This is The Mark Thompson Show. Keep it to yourself.
Who's Mark Thompson?
How about it for the professor when it comes to Middle East history, when it comes to government, politics? He's such a deep, deep reservoir of great information. John Rothmann, everybody. I should also mention he hosts a daily podcast called Around the Political World with John Rothmann. And I've subscribed, and I recommend that you do also. John, I want to put the Middle East thing aside for a moment.
Right.
And I want to talk about what happened with the former President Donald Trump's former chief of staff in the White House, Mark Meadows, apparently making a deal, getting immunity. This is a report from ABC News. And I wonder if you could speak to how that affects the Trump world of litigation, of court cases, and of re-election.
It affects it profoundly, Mark. The shift by Mark Thompson to this particular subject from everything else shows his astute ability to judge a situation. Mark Meadows is the man who was with Donald Trump constantly in the White House. He probably knows more about the functioning in those weeks than anybody else. And his flipping, which is evidently what he is doing, is a tremendous blow to Donald Trump. It will have ramifications down the road. And the most interesting thing for me will be what the response will be of the Trump people. You alluded to the fact that Mark Meadows wrote a book, which I read. I actually tried to get him on my program at KGO when the book first came out, and he wouldn't do it, despite connections which I've had over the years with a variety of people who know him. Clearly, the book was a myth. And so it will enter into the annals of memoirs as just that, a myth. But for Donald Trump, this is a terrifying time. Not only does he have Mark Meadows, but he has the legal team, which he used, 3 critical attorneys who have now flipped on him, talking about the Georgia case. And he has his former fixer, the man who was his right hand, Michael Cohen, before he was president, now testifying against him in New York. So the walls are closing in. Now, here's the question. The newly elected Speaker of the House of Representatives is a man who defended Donald Trump. He also, which I want to make clear, wrote an amicus brief. Now, remember, he's from Louisiana, but he wrote an amicus brief for those states challenging the election results. It's all nonsense. It's all proven to be fraudulent. And yet today, the Republican Party elected a Speaker of the House of Representatives, an election denier, with, I hasten to point out, the endorsement of Donald Trump. So we have to hope the House functions, and we have to hope that everything goes smoothly. But Mark Meadows, Jenna Ellis, the combination of all of these flips, let me tell you something. This is something, the next person I'm looking at is Rudy Giuliani, because Giuliani, everything points to Rudy Giuliani as part of this conspiracy. Jenna Ellis spoke of his senior, as a senior lawyer who she trusted. How will the Republican Party react to this? And what does it mean, Mark, when the Republican Party, as it did today, elects a Speaker of the House of Representatives who is an election denier, staunchly in the pocket of Donald Trump, and who Donald Trump endorsed? This is a fascinating moment in American politics.
I'd also suggest that his politics beyond the election denying and this ridiculousness, and as you say, he'll now lead that parade in many ways. His politics on gay rights, on any number of things associated with what you might consider a wedge issue, they're stereotypically hard right, deep South. I mean, again, in the stereotypical sense of that. So he just in terms of legislation that he backs, and it's the same-sex marriage, for example. He's against that. He's against. I mean, he represents that extreme wing of the right.
I regret to say it's not an extreme wing in the Republican Party. What was extreme from our perspective has now become mainstream. And the speech that needed to be listened to today was Elise Stefanik nominating him, the number 3 Republican in the House of Representatives, nominating him for the speakership. It was appalling. And but by the way, Elise Stefanik once was viewed as a moderate Republican and no longer can be classified that way. For the Republican Party, this is a departure from traditional Republican values. And all I can tell you is it's to me deeply distressing. By the way, I listened only to a bit because I have to listen to you in order to prepare for this program. But I listened briefly to the new speaker's presentation about Hakeem Jeffries, and he did note that although they disagree on many, many issues, he is prepared to work with the Democratic leader. And that to me was very encouraging. But you are precisely correct in pointing out that the new speaker is to the right of the right in the Republican Party.
So, however they put this coalition together, they put it together. I mean, I always often feel, and this is particularly borne out when you look at what they vote, how they vote behind closed doors. I always feel like the public face of the GOP is different than the private face of the GOP. That they rep this Trump thing when privately they're not as on board with Trump. It's the same thing we found out about all these Fox News Channel people. But nonetheless, when the vote comes, matter. Exactly, when the rubber meets the road, they're there.
It is exactly their public face. It is exactly what the new speaker represents. It is exactly the kind of extreme positions within the Republican Party. And to be honest with you, it's a sad day for the Republican Party, but the Democrats should be very happy because it means that they will have an easier case to make. One other quick point. I know you want to go to the Middle East, and so do I, but I want to point out for Donald Trump, it is very possible that what is happening now will ultimately deny him the Republican nomination. If it doesn't, if his present popularity is sustained and he is the nominee of the Republican Party, the Democrats are going to have a field day with this guy. And the country's divisions will be highlighted. But I can tell you for the Democrats, they believe they are on the winning team at this point because there is no doubt that what Donald Trump is promulgating and what the new speaker promulgated is antithetical to everything we believe in the United States.
Well, it's certainly, inconsistent, true with polling. I mean, I think stuff happens, and you could see if a war breaks out in the Middle East that draws in America, and we'll get to the Middle East now. If existing Ukraine situation, you've got price of gas going on. There are certain things that could come together. A constellation of variables might make it possible. It will be a burden, perhaps, on the incumbent, Joe Biden. But as you've suggested, Trump's got his own baggage. So, more on that next time. I want to ask you about what's happening in the Middle East. And one of the disturbing things I'll share first is and this has become a real sticking point, is the way that those who are advocates for Palestinians and for Palestinian rights and for what's happened in Gaza and reflecting what's happened historically in Gaza don't really respond to the question, what do you think of the Hamas attack that initiated this entire narrative most recently, in any kind of way that suggests that there are real sympathies there? I think that's hurt that cause. Apart from that, I think there are decent points being made to represent the situation and circumstance that the Gazans find themselves in. Speak to some of that in your assessment of what's going on.
First of all, I always listen to the Mark Thompson program. I want people to know that and do subscribe. But at the same time, I have to listen to what's going on in the news. And this morning, the President of the United States at the White House, greeting the Prime Minister of Australia, reaffirmed America's commitment to Israel, but at the same time said Hamas did not represent and does not represent most of the Palestinian people. With all due respect, I differ. If popular elections were held in the West Bank, there is no doubt that Hamas would win. There is no doubt that in Gaza, Hamas would win as well. Unfortunately, the Hamas covenant, which stresses the idea that Israel should not exist, is the popular image. And one of the most disturbing things that happened today is that President Erdogan of Turkey, who was planning a visit to Israel, not only canceled the trip to Israel, but denied the fact that Hamas were terrorists. And one other quick point, so I get all of this in. There was a meeting yesterday in Lebanon of the three most extreme radical forces: Nasrallah of Lebanon, Hamas, and Islamic Jihad. Why are they meeting together? Well, they clearly are doing it with the imprimatur of Iran. And there is a real danger of the widening of this war. I also want to point out to you that the president today, our president, appealed for peace on the West Bank. Let me assure you that is the furthest thing from what is in the mind of the Palestinians on the West Bank. And the Israelis feel threatened. This morning, Prime Minister Netanyahu said, and I believe him to be correct, that this threat to Israel is a threat to the very existence of the Jewish state. And we have to understand, whatever side you're on, nobody wants innocent people to die. But the Israelis made another observation that intrigued me. What happened in Gaza, the atrocity that came from Gaza to hit Israel itself, has receded in the public mind, which is not a surprise. We are headline-oriented. And so the horrific events inflicted by Hamas on Israelis, the murder of Jews. And did you hear, Mark, yesterday, the recording played at the United Nations by the Israeli ambassador of a Hamas terrorist who had just participated in the attack, who called his parents, his mother and father, to tell them he was proud to tell them he had killed a Jew and had Jewish blood on his hands, and his parents blessed him for it. When Israelis hear that, let me assure you, it sends a shiver up and down the spine of every Israeli, and I would suggest to you every Jew as well. This is a moment when there is deep concern. All right, I hope I answered the question.
No, and you answered it, and I think you put a face on it a bit. As I've heard, and we're going to, in the next half hour after you, talk further about this with someone who's been a high-profile person talking about the heartbreak associated with the Hamas attack, but the heartbreak associated with the anticipated military response and the collective punishment of Gazans as a result of a
Let
desire
me be
to
clear
root out
about this.
Hamas. Can you speak to that, please?
Yes. Netanyahu announced that that the Israelis are going to go ahead with a ground action in Gaza. I do not believe that your term is correct. It is not a collective punishment. It is a collective response. No nation can allow terrorists to come from the border and kill innocent civilians. Now, for those who say, well, this is a terrible action by Israel, my question is, what's the alternative? If the Israelis had come to the United Nations, and we'll say a word about the Secretary General, Mr. Guterres, in a moment, but if they'd come to the United Nations and said, we're not going in, it's up to you guys go in, what do you think the United Nations would have done? And I'll tell you, not a thing. And the statement by the Secretary General of the United Nations, who has, well, it was unbelievable. He called for a ceasefire. He did not condemn Hamas until the Israelis said, you ought to resign. And then he said, oh, but I include my condemnation of what Hamas did. The Israelis will not accept this notion. And the United Nations, which has never been particularly friendly to Israel, at least in recent years, needs to shape up. And I understand the pressures the Secretary General is under, but this is absolutely inexcusable. I am still waiting for the United Nations to condemn what Hamas did. They're quick to condemn Israel. But where is the condemnation? Where is the outrage? Where is the fury? And that, Mark, is what is driving many Jews in this country to ask a simple question. Where is the world?
The history of Israel is one that's been marked by being ignored by the UN and being the UN vote essentially has pretty much gone against Israel for many, many years. The UN, when it comes to votes and it comes to the politics of the UN, you know this, John, it lines up along various alliances that all stack against the Jewish state of Israel, I believe.
All you have to do, Mark, is remember when the United Nations, on November the 10th, 1975, equated Zionism with racism. And I will always remember the eloquent words of Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who was then our ambassador to the United Nations, and the eloquent words of Chaim Herzog, who was then the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations. And I also recall that when the Soviet Union collapsed, and after the peace agreement between Israel and Egypt and Israel and Jordan, the United Nations took an unprecedented action, and it rescinded the resolution equating Zionism with racism. The UN has never rescinded a resolution until that moment. And one can only hope that the forces driving the United Nations now will come to their senses. Russia and China, both members of the Security Council, are lining up with Hamas. It's astounding to me.
The irony of this, and you can help me with the history, but didn't Israel get formed by the UN? I mean, it was a British, I understand the British controlled the territory, but I thought the UN set them up.
On November 29th, 1947, the United Nations voted to partition Palestine into two states. Remember, they had partitioned India as well, which is what resulted in the creation of Pakistan. So they created the opportunity for a free, independent Jewish state, which is precisely what they talked about, and a free, independent Palestinian Arab state. The Israelis accepted and embraced the resolution. The Arabs rejected it. And you're reading my book, Icon of Evil, Hitler's Mufti and the Rise of Radical Islam. I describe that vividly in that book. Every time there has been an attempt by Israel to reach out, it has been rebuffed. And to the credit of Egypt and Jordan, and yes, to the Abraham Accords, and now the outreach to Saudi Arabia, which probably won't go anywhere now, the simple truth is that the United Nations has to catch up with the rest of the world. Israel is a fact. It's not going away. And just remember, so everybody understands this, the point of Hamas and what it's doing and its acceptance by most of the Palestinians, and I underline that, most of the Palestinians do accept Hamas. The intention is not only the destruction of Israel, which they state clearly in their covenant, but also the destruction of Jews. Remember Article 7 of the Hamas covenant. You can all Google it and read it. It comes from the Haditha. If a Jew should hide behind a rock or a tree let the rock or the tree cry out, there is a Jew behind me. Come and kill him. Not an Israeli, a Jew. And I say this out of deep frustration. The Palestinians have rights, and everybody has to understand that. And what's happening in Gaza now is terrible. But let me point out, Palestinians have rights, but not at the expense of Israel's right to exist. And what is happening now is not created by Israel, rather created by Hamas and the dastardly, horrific deed that they conducted on October 7th.
Won't Israel, John, need to negotiate with Hamas, even though it is essentially what you suggested, a terrorist organization bent on killing the last Jew on earth, or whatever they say in there, whatever. I mean, I get it. I mean, you've made the point, and you made it well. But you need to negotiate with this group that controls the Palestinian cause, right?
You said something that intrigued me, that Israel should negotiate with Hamas. First of all, Hamas will never negotiate with Israel. Absolutely not, because they don't believe that Israel has a right to exist. But do you negotiate with pure evil? Do you remember when this great country formed an alliance to defeat Nazi Germany? And there were some who suggested, oh, how about a negotiated peace? And what was the response of the United States and the free world? You cannot live in a world with people who hate. Now, I am willing to compromise. And let me point out to you, Israel was willing to compromise. Remember when the Palestine Liberation Organization declared its intention to destroy Israel? And if you remember, thanks to the Oslo Accords, the Palestine Liberation Organization ultimately recognized Israel's right to exist. And do you remember the famous handshake on the White House lawn between Shimon Peres and Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat? The tragedy here is that the Palestinian Authority has failed. Mahmoud Abbas has 86 years old, no power, hasn't faced an election because he's afraid to hold an election, and you and I know why, because Hamas would win. This tragic cycle leads Israel to believe, and I believe there is unanimity in Israel, left and right, people who oppose Netanyahu and support Netanyahu. There is a unanimity. You cannot make a deal with people who are determined to destroy you in your state, in your faith, in who you are. What a tragic commentary. And if I may go back to the United Nations for a moment, how is it possible that the United Nations, which passes resolutions on a whole host of topics, could not have condemned what happened on October 7th?
I mean, the pain of October 7th is a legitimate one. I mean, a super legitimate one. So I guess I come back to, what do you do, John? Now, this idea, and the reason I used collective punishment before, is when you say, I'm cutting off water, I'm cutting off food, that does grab, you talk about the news cycle, that is now part of the slow death, if you will, of so many within Gaza. How does that help the Israeli cause? However you...
It doesn't.
Yeah,
and it's
okay.
not Israel's burden, it's Hamas's burden. Hamas needs
that's
to
a tough
stand up.
sell right now in Gaza, you would agree.
No, it shouldn't be. Oh, if it is a tough sell, it's because Hamas has the support of the people of Gaza.
Sure.
Which tells you why the Israelis are taking the action they're taking. Let me tell you bluntly, you want some sort of discussion? Let Hamas release all the hostages now. Let Hamas formally apologize for what happened on the 7th. And I will tell you that the gates of discussion would open. But what do you hear from Hamas? Hamas is meeting in Beirut yesterday. They met yesterday, as I opened with Nasrallah, Hezbollah, if you will, with Islamic Jihad. These are supported by Iran, they make no distinction. They want what they call the Zionist entity destroyed. Now, how do you negotiate with someone who wants to destroy you? I have full sympathy for the Palestinian people. But you and I understand, Mark, that if a ceasefire were to be declared, the result would be a victory for Hamas. All they will do is rebuild. What is the reluctance to send in food and water and so forth? The answer is because Hamas seizes this, not for the people of Gaza, but for themselves. And I want to correct.
Okay. I want to get your correction, but I want to just understand. If you allow, couldn't there have been, John, a continued allowance of food and the supplies to Gaza and still pursue Israeli tactical military operations?
Yeah. Absolutely, but
it feels like that might be the answer.
Do you know why those tunnels were constructed, Mark? Does anybody discuss that? Concrete was sent in to Gaza years ago to try to rebuild Gaza.
Yeah, it was supposed to be a public works project, kind of, right?
Yes, public relief. And what did Hamas do? They seized the concrete and they used it to build their underground city, their tunnels. Where was the outcry? Where was the distress? Look, it is a shame that Hamas has inflicted on their own people, the Palestinian people, this horrific event. But to blame the victim for the outcome is just plain wrong. I am in favor and support every effort to try to provide humanitarian assistance. At the same time, let the United Nations pass a resolution condemning what happened on October the 7th. Let them pass a resolution calling for just what you and I are saying, for humanitarian aid. But remember, if you call for a ceasefire, that's exactly what Hamas wants, because that gives them the chance to do what they're doing now. Did you hear that just a few hours ago, they were firing missiles on Tel Aviv?
I mentioned that at the start of the show.
They were firing missiles on Eilat.
Yeah.
They were firing missiles on Haifa. Well, let me ask you something. When someone is firing missiles at you and calls for your destruction, what do you do? How do you respond? By the way, that is the challenge in Israel. The Israelis have restrained themselves. They have called up their reserves. They're ready to go. They're waiting. They're waiting in part because those hostages, no doubt, will die, and they need to be released. Men, women, and children. One other quick comment. Why have the 2 Israeli women who were released been so restrained in their comments? The answer is their husbands are still held by Hamas. I mean, I understand, and believe me, I haven't slept much this last few weeks, and I cry over this because it is a tragedy for the Israelis, for Jews around the world, and it is a tragedy for the Palestinian people. They need to repudiate this kind of activity once and for all. In fact, the challenge should be to Mahmoud Abbas to hold free elections on the West Bank so that the Palestinian Authority can win. But they won't. You know that. Hamas will win.
Now, a final question, John, just because I'm out of time, but I really do want to address one thing that's a bit uncomfortable. And maybe you can set the record straight on this. It was my understanding that Hamas got support, certainly from the Netanyahu government, on some level, some money, some support, because the narrative goes that within the Netanyahu government, there was a sense that supporting Hamas would help weaken the Palestinian Authority. Will you speak to that Hamas is in part, I mean, this overstates it, but this is kind of the sizzle headline. Hamas is sort of partially the creation of the Netanyahu government. I don't think that really states it accurately.
Absolutely untrue.
Yeah, but speak to the support, though. Speak to the support.
Hamas was created, as you know, in 1988. Sheikh Yassin was its creator. The Israelis, by the way, got him, clearly.
Right. But what it is now, it's suggested, is as a result of the support of Netanyahu government in part. Speak to that,
Absolutely
please.
Not. And the Netanyahu government would deny that, absolutely. And I can tell you, as somebody who studies the Middle East, that's the kind of erroneous disinformation which is spread.
So Hamas didn't get money from Israel?
No, of course not. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what Israel did. Israel tried to live side by side with Hamas, believing, and that's what the Israelis who lived on the border believed, that if they maintained good relations, they provided all of the health care and so forth that was necessary, that maybe the attitude would soften, that maybe the people of Gaza would soften in their attitude. Who are the most shocked people in all of this, Mark? The Israelis who lived on the border, who overwhelmingly were not Netanyahu supporters, who overwhelmingly wanted some sort of peaceful solution. And what happened to them? They were slaughtered. Do you know that one of the people, as this slaughter was taking place, spoke in Arabic, spoke fluent Arabic, explained, I'm not your enemy. And you know what they did? They killed that individual.
Well, we've talked before about the fact that there were teachers in that group, and that spoke both Arabic and Hebrew, and were trying to bridge these two worlds, and we're teaching kids.
I've been part of a group where called Hand in Hand, where Arab and Jewish children have gone to school together for the purpose of trying to ease tensions. When there was a program years ago called Interns for Peace, where Jews went to work in Arab areas, I was fully supportive of that. When the Wallachs created the Peace Camp in Washington, D.C., your home turf, I interviewed the Wallachs on KGO repeatedly and encouraged that cooperation among Arabs, Jews, Muslims, Christians, Baha'i. The whole idea was to try to find vehicles that would bridge the gap. But let me say, I know we've got to close. Let me just say to people, imagine when someone says they are coming to kill you. In Jewish tradition, we are told, if someone says they're coming to kill you, believe them. And if you wonder about Israel being haunted by the Holocaust, and there are still survivors alive, the main complaint of Israelis is the world was silent 80 years ago. Why are they silent now? And I want to suggest to people, the next few weeks are going to be absolutely compelling. And Mark, of course, I want to thank you for the opportunity to try to answer these questions. I'll come back anytime, because this issue, ladies and gentlemen, well, if in fact Hezbollah, Hamas, and Islamic Jihad get together under the auspices of Iran, which is a real possibility, and if those rockets fly, as they are now, toward Tel Aviv, but in a more intense way, Nasrallah has 150,000 rockets. You want to see terror? You want to see a horrific outcome? If they fire those rockets, Iron Dome cannot take them all down. And it will be absolutely a bloodbath. And I guarantee you one thing. In Israel, there is an expression in Hebrew, Ein Breira, no alternative. And I think it was summed up very well by someone who said, one of the soldiers, we have no place else to go. And so, unfortunately, this will be a tragedy. But one more thing, I know you've got to go, but let's see what the House of Representatives does today. The first resolution to be presented, as I understand it, will be a resolution supporting Israel. It may be coupled with aid to Ukraine. There is some resistance in Republican ranks. I cannot tell you what Speaker Johnson will do on that regard, but it will be a good indicator, and it will be great fodder for those of you who tune in daily to the Mark Thompson program.
Well, these are serious times, John. I appreciate you always being available and shedding some light. You've come from a clear perspective, but you inform that perspective with a lot of great history and facts. So we appreciate you so much.
I appreciate the fact you've given me the chance. Thanks very much. See you when you want me.
All right, John Rothmann, everybody. And on Wednesdays. You got it. Mm-hmm.
Smash it with your iron rod.
I come from regular stock.
There's a reason that this place is fun. Don't ever use that word.
What are the porn stars doing, Mark?
Jada had nothing to do with it.
They pay me a lot of money for having attitude.
I did everything right and they indicted me.
What you say is the political dogma that they're trying to shove down our throats.
Straight up right in, no problem.
What the hell is going on in the United States of America?
Thank you so much.
Cuatro años más.
I don't wear a mask for the same reason I don't wear underwear. Things gotta breathe.
Say what?
Do you have a secret talent?
No, no, no.
You get nothing.
can all go to hell, and I'm going back to Texas.
Out of time. Bye-bye.
Did you really just do that?
Hour 2, thank you for being here. It is, the thing. You got to smash the like button and do all that stuff.
It with your iron rod.
Share and like. Really excited to have this guy on. We only have him for a very short time, but I have mad respect for him. And I think he's an extremely principled guy, so very knowledgeable. And he has a new book out. I don't even know that we'll get to the book today, but we'll certainly get to his most recent controversy. He's showing up across media with anger expressed toward Israel about what's happening in the Middle East now. But rather than have me summarize it, please welcome the guy who is the founder of TYT, and he's a candidate for president, by the way. How about it for Cenk, everybody? Cenk Uygur. Cenk, yeah, thank you so much for taking a second. I know you're both in demand and you have so much. I don't know how you do your day when you're not in demand. I mean, when it's just a normal day, because you have a lot of stuff going on. On TYT, you talk passionately, and you've kind of taken that passion across different platforms about what's happening in Israel now and in Gaza. And we just had John Rothmann with us, who was sort of speaking to the fact that the pain of October 7th is something that the news cycle has moved past so quickly. I wonder if you could include a little bit of your thought on that, along with really giving us a framework for what's happening there now.
Yeah. So, by the way, I'm going to break a little bit of news here about the presidential campaign in a minute. But it's a super important question that you're asking, Mark. Yeah, there's a reason why that October 7th feeling seems to have dissipated, right? And it's a very, very good reason. It's because Netanyahu's government evaporated the moral high ground and has now eviscerated Israel's, sympathy, and it's among the 1,000 reasons why Netanyahu should not be the leader of Israel. He's a disaster. He's trying to get into a broader war. His response to Hamas, while I'm sure backed by some of the Israeli citizens in their rage and anger and sadness, is not the correct approach. He's now killed 3 times as many Palestinian civilians as Israeli civilians were killed on October 7th. And what happened with the Gaza incursion into Israel was terrible and unacceptable. To do 3 times worse than Hamas does not make it better. 2 wrongs do not make a right. And our leadership here in America has partly kindly said, hey, we're not asking for a ceasefire. Go ahead and keep killing them. But remember, after 9/11, we were in a rage and we made a lot of mistakes, and we did. And we killed hundreds of thousands of Iraqi civilians. And that is a great blight in our history and the reputation of America and the moral standing of America. And I don't want Israel to make that same mistake. And they're definitely in the middle of making it now. And I can tell you, I mean, in America, we get a little bit of a warped sense. The rest of the world thinks that what Israel is doing right now in Gaza is an abomination.
And is that the reason, Cenk, that the moral high ground, as you say, has been completely lost because the world just can't countenance the Israeli punchback the way it's being manifested by cutting off Gaza this way?
Yeah, look, honestly, the facts are inarguable. You can't, cutting off water, electricity, exits, power, mass relocation. These are hallmarks of war crimes and genocide, and wanton indiscriminate bombings. And there's no more pretense about targeting Hamas. They have no idea if Hamas is in those buildings. Now maybe they're in the tunnels under the buildings, but we killed everybody in the building to make sure, is the world's worst excuse. And people that are in power in America, whether they're politicians or media, half of them might buy it. Now even half of them don't buy it, but the rest of the world doesn't buy it at all. It's obvious that it's collective punishment and they're brutalizing the Palestinians, and the occupation is a core evil to begin with. So look, Israel had every right to the moral high ground after they were attacked. What Hamas did was brutal, and all of our hearts and sympathies were with Israel. But if I came up with a plan on how to destroy that goodwill, this is exactly what it would look like.
So what do you do if you're Israel? Now it's October 8th, okay? And you're Prime Minister, Cenk, and what you have let's be honest, you have a street in Israel just the same way there's an Arab street, and there are vociferous calls for the end of the Israeli state, the Jewish state, and it's out. The blood is not even dry, and there is that cry from Israel: you need to do something. And Netanyahu, clearly the wrong guy for the job, because he's all about pushing back anyway. So he's not a guy who's typified by restraint, might be a way to put it. So what do you do, though, Cenk? What with given that predicament is my point.
Yeah. So I have a short-term and long-term answer, and you're definitely right to ask a question, Mark, because people it's easy to criticize, but you have to have a constructive solution. So and my solution is not perfect either, and nobody's is, and mine would be considerably messy on both ends as well. But if I was in his position, I would send in special forces, and their job one would be rescue the hostages, and job two would be, yes, strike back at Hamas as much as possible. Now, the upside of that plan is the special forces are much more targeted than dropping a bomb on a building and having the entire building collapse and everyone inside die. The downside of special forces is that you risk your own guys more. But that's kind of the point of special forces. And so I've said that about American excursions, both positive ones when we use special forces to get bin Laden, and negatively when we drop indiscriminate drones on people, including onto weddings in Afghanistan and many other civilians that we've killed with our drones, and including American citizens we've killed with our drones. Special forces are more difficult, but the more morally correct, and by the way, militarily correct, a strategically correct way to go. That's the short-term solution. Long-term solution, and you have to be honest with the Israeli people and say, yes, we're going to lose more of our kids doing this, but we don't have a choice. We don't want to sink to the level of barbarism that Hamas did. We are better than that. And I would give a speech about the moral core of Judaism and how beautiful and wonderful it is. And I would make references to Passover and how we pray not only for ourselves, but for our oppressors, and sometimes for the oppressed as well. And so I would appeal to the moral core of Israel, which I know exists, and then use the special forces. Now, long term, you have to end the occupation. There's no ands, ifs, or buts about it. There is no justification for the occupation. And 1967 borders and the highest walls the world has ever seen. And people might not like the walls, and they might not think the 1967 borders are perfect, but it's about 2,000 times better than what we have now.
In the chat, there's a lot of pushback around Hamas as any kind of broker for peace or broker for anything else but the destruction So I'll share this with you. Cenk is completely ignorant about Hamas. Hamas has disguised themselves as Red Cross and ambulance workers. Speak to Hamas and how the fact that they've won elections and they're running the show in Gaza.
So that leads to a bunch of misnomers that I want to correct. So number one, there's this insane idea that they are going to, that the Palestinians should somehow disavow Hamas, and then that's when Netanyahu will stop killing them. Well, how are they supposed to do that? What is the vehicle by which the Palestinians say that Hamas does not represent us? There is no vehicle. It is literally an impossible ask. So that's just a way of saying we're going to kill as many Palestinian civilians as humanly possible, with no potential recourse for Palestinians, nothing to do. So what did Hamas do? Hamas won an election. First of all, sad day for the rest of us. I hate Hamas. They're Muslim fundamentalists. I'm an apostate. They would probably kill me first. Okay, but they won the goddamn election. Okay, so we should have dealt with them then. Oh, well, you can't have peace with Hamas. Well, I don't know. Did you ever try? Hamas says the same thing about Netanyahu. How about we try? You don't get to do peace with angels. You don't get to do peace with lovely people. You do peace with your enemies. That is by definition. And you don't get to say to your enemies, I don't like your representatives. Give me different representatives. But at this point, all that has become moot because, as expected, after Hamas won the election, they never allowed another election again. So the Palestinian people have no way of saying that Hamas does not represent us. And if you think, as I do, it sounds like that viewer does, that Hamas is a terrorist organization that is keeping the Palestinians down, well, how are they supposed to rebel? How are they supposed to say, Israel, we would like to do peace? So that's why saying, and then the last misnomer, they just hate us because they're anti-Semites. No, guys, there's massive anti-Semitism throughout the world, and including here in America. And we've had synagogues shot up. So anti-Semitism is 100% real. But there's generalized anti-Semitism in Turkey and Indonesia and Saudi Arabia and Norway and America, etc. But none of those places are attacking Israel. Be honest. The reason why the Palestinians at this point despise Israel is because Israel has kept them in an open-air prison for 56 years. And please do the one thing that I ask everybody. We're all humans. These labels are nonsense. So just flip the labels for a second and then see how you feel. If the Palestinians had occupied Israelis for 56 years and kept them under their thumb and said, you're too savage, you're too violent for me to make a peace deal with you, and I don't like your representatives, so you're going to be occupied forever and ever and ever because you're too violent, okay? That's the nature of your religion. Imagine. That would be horrifying, and I would hope that the whole world would cry for the Jews in Israel who are brutally occupied by the Palestinians. Now, the reality is that is the exact same situation, just reverse the labels.
We've only got another minute or two. I promised I'd get you out of here. But I do want to just follow up quickly because I'm seeing it in the chat, that Israel pulled out of Gaza to give Palestinians control of Gaza.
No, they didn't. So, hey, when you control a country or an area, when you can cut off their water, power, and electricity anytime you want. You just cut it off and you say, you're under my rule. I have my boot on your neck, and there's not a goddamn thing you could do about it. That's when you know you're occupying a country. Please don't kid yourselves. Israel is definitely occupying Gaza. Can Canada cut off our water and electricity in America? Of course not.
Right, but you didn't see the pull out of Gaza of every last Israel. There were a bunch of Israeli settlements, as you know, in Gaza. There were agricultural things, there were factories, and they were all destroyed pretty much when Hamas took over. You didn't see that, Cenk, as an act of good faith on the part of the Israelis?
No, it was a fine beginning, but it was such a half measure that it was bound to fail. And then that failure has damned us all. So guys, there's a right way to do this, and you all know it. I just have to remind you of it. Israel made a great peace deal with Egypt. And that was thanks to the angel here, that President Jimmy Carter, that brought them together in Camp David. And they didn't want to do that deal. And remember, Egypt is now the top ally of Israel in the area, and especially when it comes to, controlling the borders, et cetera, et cetera. But back then, Egypt was the leader of the people who attacked Israel and wanted to kill Israel. And everybody at the time said, the Egyptians are so anti-Semitic. They want to kill all the Jews. We can never have a peace deal with Egypt. Well, the warmongers were wrong. We did get a peace deal with Egypt, and that peace deal held for all this time. You make a peace deal with your enemies, not with your friends. And the last time Israel did a peace deal, it worked out spectacularly. So let's do that again. And by the way, guys, this isn't just about protecting Palestinian lives. What happened to those poor Israeli civilians is beyond heartbreaking. It's also about protecting Israeli lives. In fact, I don't know anything that endangers Israel more than what Netanyahu is doing now with preemptive attacks inside Lebanon and Syria. He's trying to broaden the war to include Iran. Iran is 4 times the size of Iraq, and America couldn't beat Iraq. How is Israel going to beat Iran? Why would you get into a wider war? It's literally the only thing that threatens the existence of Israel. You have to stop this madman, Netanyahu, because he's going to get you into a giant war Israel's not going to be able to get out of. It's not just morally wrong when it comes to the Palestinians. It's also strategically terrible for Israel. Please get out. Ceasefire. I don't mean to get out completely. Send in special forces. Go get the hostages. Right now, Netanyahu doesn't care about the hostages at all. In fact, he put in a plant at a meeting with hostage families. What a sick guy. And to yell at the other families, a guy who does not actually have a family member who's a hostage, who's a Netanyahu supporter, Netanyahu who put him into that meeting and said, go yell at the other family members and tell them that they should just suck it up for Israel. Netanyahu's a terrible, terrible guy. You should get rid of him immediately. Otherwise, he's going to drag all of us into the worst war we've ever seen.
Cenk, I've got to say goodbye to you, but I've got another couple of minutes. I want to ask you what's happening with this presidential run.
Yeah. So the announcement that I want to do is that we got a campaign director. So, and it's a wonderful person. It's Cara Eastman. She was a Just Democrat, ran in Nebraska, almost beat Don Bacon by about 1.5 points, which is amazing. It's nearly miraculous, the work she did in Nebraska. I'm thrilled to have her with us, and we're so much stronger now. We've applied for the ballot, obviously, in Nevada and New Hampshire. We're in great shape. cenkforamerica.com. And look, we don't have enough time here, but the main reason I'm running, for those of you who don't know, is Biden's definitely going to lose. He's losing by 10 points to independents. He's down 24 points on the economy. He's losing 5 out of 7 swing states. And now in almost every poll, especially with Kennedy and Cornel West taken into account, Trump is beating him by 4 or 5. And the Democratic candidate has to win by 5. The Democratic candidate must win by 5 to win the Electoral College. Joe Biden is 75% of the country thinks he's going to die in office if he wins again. It is insanity. It is political negligence and malpractice for the Democrats to run Joe Biden. So I'm a proxy for all other candidates to get in this race and for Joe Biden to drop out.
That's the thing. You're wedging your foot in that door so that others will follow, is my sense of it. Am I
100%? 100%. Look, I'm going to, of course, I'm going to try to win, but we need Governor Newsom, Governor Pritzker, Governor Shapiro, Governor Beshear, and Whitmer. They all need to be in the race right now. Mark, I'll leave you with this. So what people counter with, well, you don't know. I mean, Trump's such a bad candidate. He might just lose on his own. So we're going to risk a fascist winning. I mean, the guy's literally using Nazi quotes about how immigrants are poisoning the blood of our nation. Only Nazis use that quote. So we're going to risk our entire democracy on that fascist by having a weak candidate against them. So if Trump is the Raiders and they're not doing well this year, okay, why would you put the Bears up against them or the Packers up against the Raiders? They might lose to the Raiders, right? Why not put up the Chiefs or the 49ers? Why not put up your best team? Why not put, if it's basketball, why not put up Michael Jordan or LeBron James? Why are you going with a random scrub at the end of the bench? Incumbency does not help. They're hanging every problem in the country around Joe Biden's neck. Pick the strongest possible Democrat to run against the fascist. Look, I even bought bidensgonalose.com, and it redirects.
Oh my God.
Because he's going to lose. And I'm the guy telling you on the board of the Titanic, forget about the deck chairs. Move the ship. Move the ship. We cannot afford to lose to Donald Trump.
Check Cenk out regularly on TYT, all the videos, all the stuff TYT does, and go to his website to check him out. Come again, we'll talk about the book. We'll talk about some of the other stuff going on, but you've been a great voice for a lot of stuff going on right now, and I wanted to, have you beam in real quick, which you were so good to do. Thanks, Cenk.
Appreciate it, Mark.
Yeah, Cenk Uygur, everybody. Wow.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I'll be able to share some with Cenk, some of the comments from viewers in the future, but I'm glad we got him on. Cenk is pretty cool. Yeah. Woo Cenk. Exactly. You may not agree with him, but he states it plainly, and a lot of his arguments make a lot of sense. And I'll read this in a second from the Lady Beatrice, but I was just going to say one other thing. Cenk was the only voice I heard on ABC's George Stephanopoulos show, what do they call it, This Week, who said, before 2016, he said, Trump is going to win. The Democrats have underestimated this. Trump is going to win. And he went through state by state. They were all doing it around the table. He said, well, he said, I know I'm the lone voice here, but I've got Trump winning. I've got him winning here. And, and that's what happened. So Cenk is not just someone who's speaking his truth. He could be the guy speaking the truth. So
The Mark Thompson Show.
The Lady Beatrice, thank you for a super chat, actually. I'm not sure how that would solve anything in this country. It's like the song War. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. It only makes things worse. I'm not sure how that would solve anything in this country, meaning, I don't know what that refers to, Lady Beatrice. Can you tell me? I will tell you, Lady Beatrice, that I appreciate the $10 super
Big shout out.
But I do want to know what you mean by certainly you're right when it comes to, military confrontations. Virtually nothing good comes from them. Wars are good for one thing. They're good for taking territory. That's the only thing military confrontations are about, taking territory. If you're trying to take a territory, then military occupation and military insurgence is the thing that works. That's what's happening in Russia. They're trying to take territory. They're trying to take Ukraine. And if you're trying with your military to bomb somebody, house to house somebody into your political philosophy, your religion, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Look at what we tried to do in Vietnam. We tried to bomb them into becoming capitalists, to renouncing communism. It's absurd. And it led to the loss of tens of thousands of American lives and hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese. Same is true in Iraq. That was crazy. That was clearly a completely concocted Bush-Cheney endeavor. But my point is, I agree with you, Lady Beatrice. I mean, very little from war is... Mike Hendricks, thank you, Mike. What up, Mike? Big shout out. Thank you for the super sticker. Out. We have the Master of Horror coming up, Pinky. I know. Thank you for the super sticker, Pinky.
Big shout out.
$1 a day. We appreciate all the ways you support this show. Thank you for becoming one of our patrons or becoming one of our PayPal contributors. You can do that by going to themarkthompsonshow.com, and there's a click through to both Patreon and PayPal, and there you can add your name and some small amount, if you'd like, and be part of the group and the community that supports this show. Again, it's themarkthompsonshow.com. Click the Patreon or PayPal link to be part of the community that supports this show. And I tell you, we run your names at the end of every show for a reason. Without you, we wouldn't be here, and we know it. So thank you. Now, Albert. Well, thank you, Albert. But
thank you.
Yeah, Albert, I wonder if we can do a news capsule from Kim and then have the master of scary movies, the king of horror on, Jeff Dixon.
We seem to be on the same page here, Mark. I
agree.
Oh,
all right.
Albert, thank you.
That's the favorite page when we're on the same one.
Unlike the Niners defense, but
the commissioner was away for the actual X-ray of the Niners' most recent performance. Not happy, I would imagine.
Not good. It's good that it's happening during the regular season. Hopefully we could solve this, but it's the middle of the NFL season. A lot of teams are up and down, so we're just
Albert gives you a little bit of the optimistic look at the Niners. Like, I'm glad it happened now. Be better for the playoffs. A lot of teams are up and down. That's a kind of good thing to hear.
It's self-preservation, Mark. I'm saving all the disappointment for the end, so I'm gonna just. I'm going to bottle that up like any unhealthy person, an unhealthy fan would. So
the commissioner does make me feel better. I have a very fragile psychology, as you know, Kim. And somehow Albert protects me when I see the Niners going down.
I do enjoy the sports talk callers, though. Mark, you seem to be like a sports talk, like fire everybody type of guy. But I'm more of a, like, let's just wait first before we fire everybody.
Yeah, you'd be the good host of a sports talk show that way. But actually... the hosts are the ones they say fire everybody. You're the cooler.
They stir the pot a lot.
49er Nation isn't buying that these last two losses are a good thing. Oh, well, Randy wants to take you on. He'd be the caller to take you on.
Yeah, the Browns' offense not good. Their defense very historically good, and then this last loss inexcusable. This last one was not good.
Yeah, not good. All right, the master of horror, Jeff Dixon, coming up. Kim's news first. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report sponsored by Coachella Valley Coffee. President Biden is speaking on the election of Louisiana Republican Mike Johnson as Speaker of the House during a joint press conference alongside the Prime Minister of Australia at the White House. President Biden was asked whether he was concerned that Johnson would attempt to overturn the 2024 election results if President Biden was reelected. And here is what the president had to say.
Just like I was not worried that the last guy would be able to overturn the election. They had about 60 lawsuits and all the way to the Supreme Court, and every time they lost. I understand the Constitution.
Yeah, President Joe Biden speaking about Johnson, who, by the way, played a role in the Republican effort to overturn Trump's 2020 loss. He was elected Speaker today on the House floor, and Speaker Johnson now promising to find common ground with Democrats. He needed just one round of voting today to collect a majority of votes to be elected Speaker. 3 previous GOP nominees failed in their efforts to take over the gavel after Kevin McCarthy was ousted as Speaker 3 weeks ago. The U.S. and other nations are calling for an humanitarian pause in the Israel-Hamas war to aid to reach Palestinian civilians in Gaza. An Israeli ground assault had been considered imminent for more than as Israel told civilians in northern Gaza to evacuate to southern areas. U.S. officials say Hamas militants are preventing civilians from getting to a safe border to cross into Egypt. Former President Trump is being fined now for violating a gag order in his New York civil fraud case. Yep, he was fined $10,000 Wednesday after the judge in the case found he violated the order for a second time. We knew he couldn't do it. Last week, Trump was fined $5,000 after not deleting a social media post aimed at the judge's law clerk. The fine for the second violation came after Trump made comments during a break today saying this judge is a very partisan judge with a person who's very partisan sitting alongside of him, perhaps even more partisan than he is. $10,000 for you. Trump is accused of inflating the value of he and his business assets in order to get more favorable loan conditions. A new report shows...
Well, he's actually more than accused. I mean, he
is found liable for that already. Yeah. A new report shows Americans paid $130 billion in interest and fees in 2022. That's from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which said that is the highest the agency has ever seen. $130 billion in interest and fees. That's
so
what
we're living on
up.
Credit and, yeah.
And sadly, late fees continue to be the biggest penalty facing cardholders. LendingTree's chief credit analyst estimated that 2023 numbers would be even bigger. National Hurricane Center says Tropical Storm Otis, now located about 130 miles northwest of Acapulco. Otis was a Category 5 hurricane when it hit landfall in Mexico. The storm has caused landslides, flooded highways, and cut off phone and internet communications in that area.
Well, this is the big story on Otis. It not only hit as a Category 5, but 9 hours before that, it was a tropical storm. It moved from being a tropical storm to a Category 5 hurricane in 9 hours.
Is that because the water's warmer?
Exactly, because the water is warmer. Mm-hmm. And it's scary. It's a sign of the...
There's never been anything like this.
Right, there really hasn't. There's never been anything like it. It is truly unprecedented in all of recorded nature.
It's scary. There's a 22-year-old driver now facing murder charges for a crash in Malibu that killed 4 female Pepperdine University students. Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office says Frazier Boehm is being held on $8 million bail after he was rearrested yesterday, a week after the crash. The DA's office says it has enough evidence from a toxicology report and speed analysis to make these charges. Here in Sonoma County, the Board of Supervisors banning the sale of e-cigarettes and flavored tobacco products in unincorporated areas of the county. The measure goes into effect December 7th. It will affect 79 licensed tobacco retailers, which represent nearly a quarter of all tobacco retailers in Sonoma County. And lastly, not sure if you heard about this story, Mark. This one's just for you. There's a San Jose home busted as a meth lab in March that is now for sale.
Oh, I love it. It's a buying opportunity.
It was condemned. There's signs on this house that say condemned.
All right, well, it needs work. It needs work. I get it.
It's surrounded by a metal fence with big signs saying keep out, not safe.
All right, looking at a better deal probably.
I've told you, it's never easy being in this business.
It's not. In the real estate business, it's tough.
Did I say it's in San Jose? Yes.
Is there a pool?
A pool of meth. The FBI said the father of three stockpiled highly explosive bomb-making chemicals. Police also found drugs and guns inside.
Look, let's not jump to conclusions.
Quality operation here. This house, yes, surrounded by a fence. It has warning signs posted by Santa Clara County. It's listed for more than $1.5 million.
Wow.
1.5 for the crack house is what you get. Yep. It's described as a great opportunity.
What's it going to take to get you into the crack house today? You were asking 1.5, but there's room. There's room to move. Negotiate.
$1,550,000. That's the asking price for the meth house, which they call a great opportunity to own a large home in a great location.
That's
great
not
schools
fake.
nearby.
That's real.
Sweet.
Close to schools? Yes. Well, it's in San Jose. Is that what you said?
Yeah. San Jose.
Okay.
1.5.
Right.
Just in case you're in the market.
Yeah. Never know. All right.
This report sponsored by Coachella Valley Coffee. We love the coffee, we love the tea, and you get the discount. That's right. The discount is 10% off across the board. It is a Mark Thompson Show exclusive for CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. So go check out the coffee, check out the teas and what they have to offer there, and then enter Mark T at checkout altogether. Mark T.
Hey, which one do you use, Mark Thompson?
Yeah.
We all know, trust me. I'm Kim McAllister, and this is the Mark Thompson Show.
How dare you?
Whatever.
Do you feel it? It's the Mark Thompson Show.
Who's Mark Thompson?
Hey, which one do you use, Mark Thompson?
Yes, it's Halloween, everybody. I know we've been all over the trick and the lack of treat when it comes to the news. We've been talking Donald Trump, talked about Mark Meadows, the flipping. We've talked about the Middle East, did a whole hour on that. And it's
That's
great
a different type of spooky season, Mark.
Yes, that is the true scary stuff. This guy joins us annually, though. I think this is his fourth time here. Joined us on KGO Radio. He's moved to YouTube. He's been with us. And I think even before I was on KGO, Jeff was in on my old podcast. But anyway, I call him Master of Horror. Somebody else he probably wouldn't be comfortable with that, but he certainly knows horror and scary movies so well. And if you have any, put them in the chat, and we can integrate that into our conversation with the great Jeff Dixon, everybody.
Hello.
Look at you, Mr. Halloween. Thank you for being here. I know you're busy. You've got a new show that I would love for you to mention now, and we'll mention it again before the end.
Yeah, it comes out this upcoming Friday, October 27th on Apple TV+. It's called Curses, like curses. And we did it with DreamWorks. It's an animated gateway horror show for kids and adults alike.
Yeah, you call it gateway horror. What does that mean?
Gateway horror is basically dipping your toe in the water of horror.
It's a starter horror series, is that what you're telling me?
There's never been anything like this.
Yeah, there has, actually. So it's like things like back in the day, Spielberg used to do a lot of these like Gremlins and Poltergeist and stuff like that, where those, Poltergeist people don't realize was rated PG. So there's a lot of these kind of gateway horror things, almost the Goonies. Most people wouldn't consider it horror, but there's a lot of really scary parts of that for kids. So this is our kind of attempt at the gateway horror.
That's great. Curses, it's called. I told you, Jeff Dixon, that I was on the set of Poltergeist. I snuck on the set, right? I told you that story, I think.
Yeah, you did.
I know. It's my only horror movie brag. that I snuck onto a closed set. But here we go. My 13-year-old wants to see her first real horror movie, says John. She thinks she can handle blood and gore. I have some ideas, but would love some suggestions from your guest. Thinking Creepshow or The Thing?
Two of my all-time favorite movies. Creepshow is fun. It's funny that Creepshow is mentioned because, not to keep bringing it back to Curses, but the look of Curses, the entire art style is based around old EC comics like Tales from the Crypt and Vault of Horror, and that is exactly what Creepshow was going through as well in the live action space. So that has definitely been a big influence for me. But I do think what I just mentioned, Poltergeist, is another one to throw in there. That movie still holds up and is still pretty incredible. The Thing is one of my all-time favorites and always will be. And then if you want to throw some sci-fi in there, Alien and Aliens, the 1-2 punch there are fantastic.
Yeah, that's a really great point. It's funny that both The Thing and Alien and Aliens, they feel like they're in that sci-fi realm as well as the horror realm. It's those Venn diagrams kind of overlap there, and you buy into the universe, I think, in both those cases, right? The universe of space and exotic alien stuff, and that was an alien craft that crashes, I think, in The Thing, right? That's how it starts.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, a lot of horror comes from fear of the unknown, and one of the biggest things is the unknown of space and the universe. So it's like, and there's a long history of great horror sci-fi mixes. I mean, one of the more aggressive ones that I always love is Event Horizon. I think Event Horizon is a really great sci-fi horror movie.
Yeah, I never saw Event Horizon. But that's Event Horizon is that point right before you go into a black hole. Isn't that what an Event Horizon is? Yeah,
I think so.
Luis says, Jeff, Satanic Hispanics, any good?
I admit I have not seen it yet. I've been a little busy this month, but
he has a news show coming out.
I hear great things, and in fact, a few of the directors that have pieces on there, I know their other movies, and one of the guys on there, Demian, I think is how you say his name, did a movie called Terrified a few years ago. I think the original title is like Aturados or something like that. It's from Argentina. He has a new movie that came out a few weeks ago that might be one of my favorite horror movies of the year called When Evil Lurks. I think it's coming out streaming on Friday, same day as us. So that's apropos. But yeah, he does one of the segments in there. And another segment is done by a director who did a Cuban horror movie called Juan of the Dead, which obviously is a little take of Shaun of the Dead and all that, but it's also comedy horror, but it's also great. So, I mean, I've heard nothing but great things about it. I have not personally seen it yet, but I will remedy that by Halloween, I guarantee.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you have you usually are pretty quick on everything. I know you've been a little distracted with your work. 976 Evil, they're saying, Jennifer says in the chat. 976 Evil, when did that come out? It was a while ago, right? Or am I wrong?
It's 80s, I think. And I'm trying to, I think if I remember correctly, I'd have to probably make sure, but I think that was Robert Englund's.
It is Robert Englund. Wow, that's very impressive. Debut. Yes.
Yeah. And Robert is in Curses. So there we go. We keep bringing it back.
Wow, look at you. Robert Englund directed 976 Evil. And Robert Englund also is Freddy, right? Or am I okay?
Yes, from Freddy Krueger.
Yeah. So the Freddy Krueger series,
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Nightmare on Elm Street. That exploded right away. Or was that a low simmer that it did explode right away?
Oh yeah. That was right in that time period where Wes Craven just could do no wrong in my eyes. So yeah, that launched pretty well and pretty strong, all of those.
When you met Robert Englund for the first time, when was that? And was it on this most recent project, or you probably had run into him before?
I've just as a fan. This was the first time that I'd ever worked with him, and I got to tell you, they always say never meet your heroes, but I would say meet your heroes at the Robert Englund, because he was awesome. He would have suggestions about the character he's playing. He's like, oh, he comes from this time period, and he wouldn't say this. He would say it phrased this way. We're like, of course, Robert, you tell us. And he was awesome. He was like great to work with. He would chat with us about horror movies when we were done recording, because he's a big horror guy himself. So he's absolutely fantastic.
Somebody's saying Phineas is saying Candyman, Candyman, Candyman. That was also a series, though, right? Candyman, or not?
No, it was a movie that came out, and then they just rebooted it remade it recently. But yeah, there was I mean, I guess a series of movies. There was a few sequels of the original as well, the Tony Todd character. But then they did reboot it, which I like both of them. I think they're great.
Any
movies.
inside info on when the series Evil might be coming back to Paramount Plus? Asks Lori.
I wish I knew. I do know with the writer's strike and the continuing actor strike, a lot of stuff is on hold.
Let me ask you about characters. We mentioned Freddy Krueger. What other scary characters have had the kind of through line like that, where they, show up in a series of films?
There's kind of the holy group of them. There's your Jason Voorhees from the Friday the 13th series. Sorry. There's Michael Myers from the Halloween movies. There's now Ghostface from the Scream movies. And I mean, there's Leatherface from the Chainsaw movies. I mean, there's a series of kind of those holy characters, but recently a few relatively newer ones are coming out, like John Kramer from the Saw series, or Art the Clown from Terrifier and Terrifier 2, and the soon-to-be Terrifier 3 has become a new kind of genre icon. So there's always kind of new ones popping up.
And the most recent crop of films from Jordan Peele, I never knew as I watched Key and Peele that this guy was this brilliant filmmaker who had this terrific, almost psychological horror associated with so many of his that had that inside him. I mean, you see in horror different kinds, right, Jeff Dixon? You see that psychological horror that I've just talked about, or that I just referred to, and then you see the boo scare horror. You see gore. I mean, it seems as though there's been an evolution across a number of different genres within the genre.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is. The conversation of what is horror is always one that people are having, but it's like, in my opinion, whatever horror is whatever scares you. So some people might go, oh, that's not horror. It's like, did it scare you? Yeah. Then it's probably got some horror touches to it. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be firmly labeled. Horror can cross everything. And what's funny about Key and Peele, I don't know if you have rewatched that series lately, because I think that series is absolute genius. I've watched it through a couple times. Knowing that he's a horror fanatic, you watch those with a different eye, because you realize there's at least a skit every 1 or 2 episodes that is horror based. He has his horror is running through so many of those skits, and now that you look back at them totally differently. Oh,
that's really interesting. That's really, really interesting. What are the other are the new franchises or directors or ideas around this scary movie that you've really sparked to in the last few years?
Well, like I said, the one that kind of blew me away was that movie called When Evil Lurks. I just that movie just, I loved it. I also really liked from this year, one of my all-time favorite kind of series are the Evil Dead movies. I grew up kind of worshiping Sam Raimi, and they've kind of, they did a remake a few years back, but just this year they did Evil Dead Rise, which was another kind of continuation of the Evil Dead movie, and I thought it was absolutely fantastic. I heard they're doing another one, so I hope that's true. But that's another series that I think has caught momentum, and that came out earlier this year. I really love that movie. Another one that's actually a lot of fun, because I'm a sucker for horror anthologies, are the VHS movies. Those are on the streaming service Shudder. They're horror anthologies that just, they have a lot of either upcoming horror directors or established horror directors, and they have 15, 20-minute little short segments that make the movie. And I love horror anthologies, and the most recent one is fantastic. I love it.
Oh, really? And what is it called?
It's called VHS. I mean, there's.
But you're saying within VHS, there are all of these different ones.
Yeah. So VHS, like VHS, video,
Right.
home, whatever. But it's so the most of the shorts are set in the 80s time period, so they look like they've been filmed on the old VHS.
I see.
So it's a lot of found footage type stuff. But
that's cool.
They're a fun series.
Did Blair Witch? I was just trying to think of different kinds of. Were we talking about genre within the genre, or things that kind of shook it up, or decisions that were made, or directorial choices? It feels like Blair Witch was that. Before Blair Witch, had there been kind of that? It seemed like that was almost the first in that kind of presentation of scary.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few kind of examples of some other types like that, but nothing really caught fire like Blair Witch. I mean, funny story about Blair Witch. I actually I grew up in Utah, and I used to go to the Sundance Film Festival all the time, and they have their movies in categories: premieres, documentaries, and midnight. And they had a midnight section, which has both premieres and documentaries. Midnight is normally where there's a lot of genre movies. Well, I was just reading a paragraph about this thing called the Blair Witch Project. No one knew about it. It was like, oh, they found these videotapes. These people were like, oh, that sounds interesting. We had no idea. We all went to this thinking we're watching this. And for most of that movie, all of us were like, we're watching a snuff film. We're watching these people die. Like, we had no idea. There was no fanfare. No one knew about it. It was one of the first screenings, and everyone lost their mind. And it wasn't until the actors came out on stage for the Q&A that everybody was like, you're kidding me. So
wow.
I don't think that could happen anymore because it's been established. But
Sure.
To be able to be there right at the forefront of this, fake found footage horror movie.
Yeah, you were like there at
incredible.
right as it was, and that was an interesting choice that they made to not to leave it cloaked in questions. And was that a studio movie or not, Jeff?
Not at all. It was made for nothing. I mean, I'd have to look up. I think the filmmakers were from like Florida or University of Florida or something like that. But it was done for like nothing, and it just blew up. I mean, that one definitely. And then around that same time, a few years later, was Paranormal Activity, which kind of had that same idea of the kind of found footage. That was even made for less money. I think that was made for like $10,000 or something, and that spawned 5 movies or so. So
just wild. So, I'm just looking through the chat in our last second or two. What happened to Clive Barker? Louis asks. Thought he did some creative things with Hellraiser, Candyman, Nightbreed, etc. Then disappeared.
He's still out there and still writing. I do know that he's had a lot of health issues in the last decade. So that was a little prohibitive. But he did attend a screening last year at the Beyond Fest Festival out here in Los Angeles for when they did the Hellraiser reboot. And he came for a Q&A there, which was, good to see. But yeah, he's great. I love Clive Barker. I mean, I've never met him, but I love his work.
Yeah, what he's done for the genre. It's funny, these anthologies, in fact, they say it. Deirdre says, I grew up with fantastic features on Friday nights. These, like, as you sort of suggest, entry-level scary movies. It is weird how we kind of slowly work our way in, right, Jeff? And then...
Oh, yeah. I mean, everybody...
Did you jump in that way or not? How did you get hooked on it?
Well, it's funny. I talk about this with our show right now, and the reason it's a little personal for me is when I was a kid, I was a super scaredy cat, and I was afraid of everything. And I saw these horror movies as a way to challenge myself, and I'm like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. I'd watch something, credits roll, and I'd be like, okay, good, okay, and then I'd watch something else, maybe a little bit of okay. And so as I started watching more and more, and I was 9, 10. And I started watching these. I started getting all this confidence. I'm like, hey, I can do this. I can overcome some of this. And so as a kid, I saw these as a way to overcome fears in real life. And so that's why with this new show, it's like if I can kind of give a little bit of that to some younger kids, where fear in, make believe entry space can actually translate into overcoming some fears in your real life, that would be huge.
You're paying it forward, aren't you, Jeff? In your own horror show way. What is it, Kim? Go ahead.
It's interesting that you just mentioned being a scaredy cat, because I'm a total scaredy cat. I wondered, which means I don't gravitate towards scary movies at all. I push them as far away from me as I can get. And I wonder what you think about what that says about someone's personality, whether loving horror movies is kind of like this adrenaline rush, or whether that's a kind of a thrill seeking, or whether someone who doesn't like it is a wimpy person, or what is it? What do you think about the personalities of people, or is it just, you like it or you don't?
No, honestly, it's funny because every single human being is slightly different in the reasoning. One of the things for me that I actually liked, in addition to the overcoming, is I like the community aspect of horror. Horror brings together a lot of people and like-mindedness. And what's funny is there's a lot of psychological studies about horror that when the state of the world is in a really awful place, like during the pandemic, horror viewing goes way up, because they say that, like, psychologically it becomes like, oh, let's just look at this fake horror to take away from the real horrors out there. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times people connect the real horror and the fake horror, and they can't watch horror movies and that's why it's like, it has less to do with being a scaredy cat. And it's just like, it's all too much. I just want to watch a comedy and whatever. So some people just don't really like that feeling. Other people actually see it as a catharsis. And so it's like, it's a roller coaster. It's a safe scare. There's credits at the end, the roller coaster's over. So that's, I mean, but it is, I wish there was, an easy answer, but it is so.
No, it's interesting.
So many
people.
Yeah. Catharsis is a ding word. Thank you. The scary movies are a babe magnet, says Square. I don't know about that. Did you find that growing up, Jeff Dixon is really interesting. He grew up in the, Mormon, Utah. Mormon family, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
absolutely.
Did you find that the Mormon girls you went on dates with were interested in horror movies, or not so much? No.
No, I was most definitely the outcast who watched the horror movies. It was not the norm or the typical thing by any means, but I always loved it.
Again, he is the scary horror writer, co-creator of DreamWorks' Curses. Watch it October 27th, Friday. Apple TV Plus is where you'll find Curses. It's the perfect entry-level, kind of cool, geared to kids, but also adults will like it also kind of thing. And
there's a lot of horror Easter eggs, by the way, for the horror community who are horror fans, whether they are visual and audio.
Oh, I love that. I can't wait to check it out. All right, Apple TV Plus on Friday. Curses is the name of it. And Jeff, we love your annual visits. Happy Halloween, and all the best, my friend. You're just one of my favorite people. It's great to have you in.
Thanks, Mark.
Bye, Jeff Dixon.
See you later.
So long.
Do you feel it? It's the Mark Thompson Show.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. It is kind of scary the whole day. Thank you, MT, for ending on a light-hearted note. Yes, thank you, Julie. You have the ideal mix on the Mark Thompson Show. Thank you. Yeah, it is good to, with all the legit horror going on in real life, to have the artistic form represented. So it was really, really cool to have him in. Albert, you are here tomorrow, sir. I'm just checking my schedule for...
Albert, thank you.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm here for the rest of the week.
Kim, you are here as well.
How are you?
I'll be here.
All right. And then tomorrow, Kim, I like to ask you, because you're the keeper of the schedule, what is on the show tomorrow, Kim?
Should have known this was coming. Well, tomorrow is, of course, Thursday on the Mark Thompson Show.
David Katz, maybe?
By now, I just know when Kim I know all
Katz.
of her go-to stalls.
It's
funny on the Mark Thompson Show, Mark, Thursday.
We have David Katz tomorrow at 12:05, and Belinda's back from vacation. So It's the Planet Stupid resumes, and it's very exciting. That is what's happening on the big Thursday Mark Thompson Show.
There's never been anything like this.
I'm very excited about it. So, So Belinda will be back in answer to Phineas's question. Thank you, everybody who gives us a thumbs up and reps the show. When you share it across any of your social media platforms, it helps us. And thanks for all the financial support as well. You guys are great.
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
And the moral support. I mean, the support is all great.
Out of time. Bye-bye.
After Party Live is going down.
And we'll do it live.
Until tomorrow. Bye-bye.